Where next for Bangladesh after the Supreme Court rejects calls to remove Islam from the constitution? Also on today's program, a window into the world of tomorrow. We look at why virtual reality is set to take over. And in Picture This, the first images from Palmyra after the Syrian regime recaptures it from Daesh. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. It's a decision that was 28 years in the making. A petition filed in 1988 against Islam being Bangladesh's state religion has finally been heard by the country's highest court, and within minutes it was dismissed. Bangladesh was born in 1971 after a war of independence with Pakistan, and secularism was adopted as a fundamental principle. But that changed in 1988 when a military ruler made Islam the state religion of the mostly Muslim country. Following a series of attacks on secular and atheist bloggers, the Supreme Court decided it would finally hear a challenge to that decision. But opinion in the country is deeply divided, and many, including the opposition Jamaat-e-Islami party, have called for strikes and protests against the hearing. Today's newsmaker is Bangladesh, as we ask whether there's room in the country's constitution for both Islam and secularism. Well, joining me now from London to discuss Bangladesh's religious identity is Abbas Islam Khan, a human rights activist and barrister, and Arif Rahman, a Bangladeshi British secular blogger. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us. Abbas Islam Khan, do you believe it needs to go?
No, I don't, because I believe in the will of the people, because if you look at the Article 7(1) of Bangladesh's constitution, it clearly is mentioned there that it is the people of the Bangladesh who holds the power, and in Article 7(2) it says the will of the people of the Bangladesh are the constitution, would be expressed in the constitution. So I think majority of the Bangladeshi people, they want Islam to be there as a state religion. So that's why I think needs to be there in our constitution. And also, your guest said previously that in 1972 secularism were included in Bangladesh's constitution, but you need to think about the historical context as well. Secularism was not there before 1972, before the enactment of the constitution, and that part of the constitution was not the will of the people. That part of the constitution was basically the will of the 34 members who drafted the constitution. It was recommended by the foreign expert who wanted the secularism to be inserted in the constitution. Also, before the constitution was enacted, it was heavily relied on India's constitution.
Okay, now Abbas, I don't want to get involved in technicalities. Let's look at the current context in the country right now. So you have converts to Christianity being killed, atheist bloggers being hacked to death, Shias are persecuted, Ahmadis are persecuted, and so on and so forth. There's a feeling, and there's a lot of factual evidence to show that minorities are not protected in this country. How do you propose, Abbas, sorting out this problem of minorities not being protected in a country that says that Islam is the only way we're going to go?
Now, the problem with the minorities, Islam is a state religion for 28 years. But it's more of a concern, this attack on the minorities are very recent, last 3-4 years. So last 28 years, Bangladesh lived peacefully. There were unity between different religions. But very suddenly, after the secular government came into power, these attacks on minority became an issue. Now think about it. The important fact about these attacks on the minorities are, these are mainly not, the religion is not involved in most of the attacks. The thing that is involved is land grabbing, political interest, or personal vengeance. These are the main issues.
They're hacking people to death. I mean, they're killing people because they changed their religion or because they are deemed to have insulted Islam. How can you say religion has nothing to do with this, Abbas?
No, because you have to think about it. I told you before, it's more of a political issue.
Okay.
Because rather than trying the culprits, rather than ensuring that the victim getting justice, is the government and the secular people, the secular
so it's the secular people.
they're taking
Rahman,
political interest out of this
sure,
issue.
Let's get a response from Arif Rahman. Arif Rahman, it's the secular people's fault.
Well, I wanted to correct Abbas's two misstatements. He said that secularism was not introduced in our constitution before 72. Our Bangladesh as a country was only liberated in 1971, and 72's constitution is the first constitution. Bangladesh, when it was liberated from Pakistan, another Islamist country, Bangladesh was formed based on those secular notions. So secularism was the very beginning, was part of Bangladesh actually. And then Abbas said that this attack on minorities is only a few years phenomena, which is absolutely a false statement, because when Bangladesh was liberated, there was 26% Hindus in Bangladesh. Now we only have like 7%. This is a sharp decline, and that is a result of continuous persecution of the minority people, and they're driving them out. I know I can say that there is motives behind it, but the machinery that is used to actually drive them out and to persecute them is religion. Even this week, earlier in Sylhet, there was a mosque that used its megaphone middle of the night to radicalize people, who then congregated and burned a Hindu family's house and property. And the mosque itself is responsible for radicalizing and making those people do those things. How can you avoid these things? So blaming it on secular people is actually is a mistaken way, and this needs to stop. And we need to address the problem that we have at the moment, is that people's core faith, their belief to their God, is being used for political means by political parties and extremists and fundamentalists.
Arif, do you think that the Awami... I'm sorry, Abbas, I just want to ask Arif a question. Do you believe that the Awami League has tried, they've tried to emphasize secular values here? Are they out of touch with the masses, as is being suggested by Abbas Islam Khan, that they are at odds with what the people want? That sort of democracy means people want Islam and not secular values.
This is the thing. What Abbas claimed, I actually forgot to mention, Abbas claimed that people want Islam to be part of the state machinery, which is also a mistaken form of the truth, because people loves Islam, or people obeys Islam as their personal core belief. The Islam in Bangladesh that we have is so much different than the Islam that we have in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia. Bangladesh's Islam is, people's Muslim are really from the softer version of Islam that has come from like hundreds of years. This is not the radical version, and they do not want political version of Islam implemented in Bangladesh. That's why the political parties, Islamic political parties like Jamaat-e-Islami, barely gets any seats in national elections. Although 90% of the people are Muslim these days, it's only the few or a group of extremists that are abusing Islam and trying to do all these mishaps and giving Islam a bad name. And Abbas is not actually helping the Islamists.
Arif, you're on the hit list, aren't you, of the 84 people that they're after?
Yes, I'm at the very top at the moment.
Okay, let me pose the question then to Abbas. Abbas, does Arif deserve to be on that hit list of people who deserve to be killed for insulting Islam?
Obviously not. I want to clarify. Obviously not. He shouldn't be on the hit list, and I agree with that there's a rise of extremism in Bangladesh. But before that,
there shouldn't be any hit list.
Explaining more on that one, I want to talk about the two issues that Arif talked about before. Firstly, the Constitution came into effect in 1972, 16 December. What was the Constitution before 1972, 16 December? That was the Proclamation of Independence. There was nothing mentioned about secularism in the Proclamation of Independence. There were three principles. There were equality, social justice, and dignity, and human dignity. These were the three issues that were three fundamental principles in the Proclamation of Independence. Also, if you look at the historical context, the 6-point movement that was started by the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation, there was nothing mentioned about secularism in that 6-point movement.
We can debate
Then
about the
also,
word itself
later on, if
for
you think
the
about,
next hour.
during
I'm going to stop you there for a
different-
second, Abbas. I'm going to stop you for a second. I have a very simple question for you. Is Bangladesh a safe place for the Shia, for Ahmadis, for Christians, for atheists, for Hindus, and anyone else who's not a Sunni Muslim, Abbas?
It is a safe place. To be honest, it is a very safe place, and it is one of the safest places in the world. Although I admit there are some situations, there are some incidents that are going on, and it is a secular government who claim themselves as a secular. They have to deal with that issues, and we need unity, we need cohesion, we need to think about, you know, all those divisions that we have at the moment. We have to find out a way to tackle this extremism.
Okay.
So extremism is not only the Islamic extremism that's a problem in Bangladesh, it's also secular extremism, which is creating division within Bangladesh, which is like causing all those problems, that persecution of the Islamists in Bangladesh at the moment,
so
imprisonment of hundreds and thousands of students of Islam.
Okay,
so these are the reasons. These are the reasons of this
the
campaign
secular
of the
extremists are imprisoning
secular
hundreds.
extremists.
Okay, the secular extremists are imprisoning hundreds and thousands of Islamists as well.
Sorry?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. It was lots of noise. Can you
Abbas
repeat,
says the
please?
secular extremists are imprisoning hundreds of thousands of Islamists as well.
No, it's because
Again,
of the
Abbas
campaign
is
of the
using
secular
rhetoric,
extremists, the secular
not
government, the
backed by
government who's
facts,
ruling
by
the
the way.
country
Abbas,
and claiming they're a
Abbas,
secular
Abbas,
country,
Arif,
secular party.
Abbas, you made a point. I'm posing it to Arif. You made a point. You said the secular extremism and the imprisonment of Islamists. I'm posing it to Arif. Arif?
I don't understand what is secular extremism. If you are asking, when you talk about cohesion of people, you should include people, general human beings, rather than not based on their religion, caste, or creed, or anything. If you are asking for cohesion, you should be including everybody. Now, if you are wanting Islam to be a state religion, and on the other hand, you want cohesion, how can you actually achieve that? And secular extremism asking for cohesion again, but not based on religion. So if you're calling it that extremism, then you are actually not doing the good job, because the real extremists, they kill people, they bomb people.
Yeah.
And secular extremists don't do anything like that. So how are you comparing them in the same level? I don't understand.
So final question then for Abbas. There's a big difference between having a website and criticizing beliefs you don't like and hacking someone to death, right? The two are not the same, are they?
No, they are not the same, obviously. What you have to understand in this situation is there is a global rise of extremism, and what's going on in Bangladesh, there's a persecution going on the Islamists. There is the freedom of expression. There's no freedom of expression at the moment. The media, Islamic media, they have been shut off. There's obstruction going on in organizing Islamic conferences. So all these issues add up, and when the secular extremists, they're creating division, they're not talking about religious neutrality, they're talking about banning Islam, banning Islamic practices like hijab. They're talking about banning Adhan, the prayer to call. So these are the issues that the extremists are using to recruit
You mentioned it a few times. You mentioned it a few times now, and I have to give Arif an opportunity to respond to that. In 15 seconds, please, I'll let this be the final word.
When Abbas says that there is obstruction on Islamic movements being organized, think about it. Ijtima. Do you know about Ijtima? The second largest religious congregation after Hajj happens in Bangladesh. It grows so big that now it has to be done in two separate occasions. If Bangladesh government was stopping these things,
what about the dozens of Islamic conferences which were not let them organize?
Well, extremism should be controlled.
You made the point,
doing extremism. If you're promoting extremism, then it's not good. They should be controlled, and maybe government is trying to control the extremism.
I've got to put a lot on this because we are out of time. Gentlemen, time's our enemy. We are totally out of time. I've got to move on to another segment. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show, Arif Rahman and Abbas Islam Khan. Thanks a lot. Still to come on the Newsmakers. When the real and the not so real come together, we look inside the world of virtual reality. And in Picture This, the ruins of Palmyra, or what remains of them, after 10 months of Daesh control. On Monday, the first ever consumer virtual reality headsets hit the shelves. It's the first step in what traders expect will be a big year for the emerging technology. So how is it changing the way we see the world? And is it here to stay? The Newsmakers' Gracie Jerome reports.
VR is the next platform where anyone can create and experience anything.
A whole new perspective. The way we see the world could be about to radically change. From gaming to medicine and even politics, the future will likely be seen in a very different light.
Now you don't just look at the stars, you fly among them.
As the line between the real world and what isn't really there becomes increasingly blurred. Some say virtual reality is primed to take over our lives. And before long, it'll be in households from Silicon Valley to Hong Kong. But how far has VR really come? And has it developed enough to shake up our perception of the world around us? Virtual reality began when the first computer-generated headset was created in 1968. But it entered the mainstream in the 1990s.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real?
The blockbuster Matrix series had the lead character Neo battling to escape a virtual existence, where simulation and reality are blurred. Now, scientists are finally making the concept of inhabiting a computer-generated environment a reality.
Last year was a year of experimentation for virtual reality, and this year I think will be implementation.
VR technology has come a long way since its inception, and it's no longer just for avid gamers and tech buffs. On Monday, a leading VR developer, Oculus, started shipping the first consumer version of its Rift headset. Tech companies are already promoting versions that use your mobile phone to generate digital displays. But can virtual reality really change the way we see the world? Facebook bought the rights to Oculus VR's Rift headset for more than $2 billion last year. Its creator says virtual reality is the final platform, and they're trying to make this technology more accessible to the public. And its uses go beyond just gaming. It's being used in medicine to simulate surgeries to train doctors in new techniques. The US and other militaries use VR to train recruits using flight and battlefield simulations. And when they're not playing Space Invaders, astronauts on board the International Space Station use VR to communicate with their teams back on Earth. But it's still an expensive market. The Rift costs about $600. And in a world where technology is constantly evolving, some question whether this could just be the latest tech fad. But it seems likely that our perception of the real and the not-so-real is about to shift significantly. Gracie Jerome, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to talk about just how much virtual reality is changing how we see the world is Tom Surters. He's a creative technologist and co-founder of virtual reality company Bryonic in London. Thanks for joining us, Tom. Make the case for why this will be a game changer and not just for games. Give us some practical realities that we will probably face here.
Well, I think initially it's going to start off at games because what virtuality really does is it lets you experience being somewhere where you're not. And that can be applied to all sorts of different areas. For instance, it can be applied as to training, it can be applied for virtual tourism, it can be applied for education. So you could take school kids on a trip to the Louvre, who might be in India. It's got all sorts of different use cases. Ultimately, what it does is it breaks down the barrier between us and the digital world, the one that's always been sitting behind a computer screen or a mobile screen. And I think its impacts are going to be profound in the long term.
Yeah, what's the most exciting development right now?
I think possibly the use cases, I think, as I say, around actually being able to create 3D content and to let people actually create their own virtual worlds is really exciting. At the moment, when designers and create like 3D systems, they have to do it through a screen. They have to use a mouse or some kind of touchpad. And this, when you have virtuality glasses, you can actually interact with it with your hands. And this is really going to revolutionize how people create content for 3D, for internet. And I think in the long term, this is going to be really exciting.
Mm-hmm. The Wall Street Journal had a headline, VR is cool, this may be bigger, and they're referring to augmented reality. What's really the difference, and why is this bigger and cooler than virtual reality?
Well, the main difference between virtuality and augmented reality is with virtuality, you're completely immersed in the digital world, so you can't see the real world once you have the glasses on. With augmented reality, what they do is they superimpose digital images with the real world. So I might be looking at a table and I might see superimposed on that a model of, say, a building. Now, obviously, being immersed in a digital world is fantastic if you want to get lost in a digital world. For instance, that's where things like entertainment, games, etc., really will make use of VR. But we all live in a real world, so we can imagine lots of applications where we might want to be able to walk around the street, but we might want to have like information superimposed on top of that. Maybe I'm talking to you and I can see information about, you know, what business you come from, your likes, your dislikes. And again, training is going to have vast implications. So I think the analysts are probably right in that in long term, what we're going to see is both of these, and it's really going to depend on why you want to use this kind of technology.
Wow. Tom Surtis, thank you very much. Good to talk to you. In today's Picture This, we have one of the ancient wonders of the world, Syria's Palmyra. The archaeological site faced possibly the greatest threat to its survival when Daesh overran it last year. But it was retaken by regime forces over the weekend, and a picture is emerging of the damage left behind. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker has been Bangladesh, as the country grapples with a decades-long struggle over its religious identity. While 9 out of 10 Bangladeshis are Muslim, secularism has been a founding principle of the country. But is it surprising the country's citizens seem divided over the role of secularism and state religion when it's a contradiction written into the country's constitution? You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. As always, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.